Hello, this is Tony Messer at Pickaweb, where we ask the questions that small businesses want answers to. Today I'm speaking to Chris Croft. Chris is one of the UK's leading trainers and provides a wide variety of courses designed to involve, inspire and motivate people of all levels. To date, Chris has trained over 30,000 people and is a successful author with titles such as Time Management and The First Book of Management, which are available on Amazon. Chris, a very warm welcome.
Hi.
Hi, thanks very much for joining us today. And Chris, I know you're an expert in project management, time management, motivation. I want to focus in particularly, if I can, in our interview on project management. And the first thing is, help us to understand what is a project? How do you define it?
Well, a project is usually defined in dictionaries and things as a collection of interrelated tasks designed to bring about a change. So if you want to change anything, and it's more complicated than just one task, it's a project. But I think there's one other thing about projects that's worth knowing, which is they're things you haven't done before. So if you build motorway bridges all the time, it becomes a process. It's really it's when you do something you haven't done before that it's a project. So changing anything is a project. Anytime you go into the unknown, so it might be getting new customers, moving to a new building, changing the structure of your company. Anything that you change is worth having a plan, and as soon as you need to plan it, it's a project.
Okay, so we're clear on that. It's got it's a kind of, it's an event, isn't it? It's not something which is in your normal everyday circumstances. It's not a process. This is something that has defined and start and end date. Then.
Yeah, that's right. So start to finish before.
Because I think that there is a preconception amongst particularly small businesses sometimes that projects and project management, this is something which big businesses do. It doesn't really affect me, and hence maybe when they do actually encounter a project, whether they know it or not, it may not be as successful as it could be. So what are the sort of steps, you know, that people should be looking at when they're approaching a project, you know, and how long does it take, for example, to make a project plan?
Well, I think anything more than about probably 10 tasks would be worth having a plan for. You won't be able to keep it in your head, and if you try to keep it in your head, it'll go wrong. So most of project planning is about getting a plan written down on a piece of paper, which then everybody can see, but which also you can use to monitor the progress. So I would say it would probably only take a couple of hours to make a project plan. And the plan would involve, first of all, defining really carefully what your project is. If it involves customers, you've got to be really careful to define what it is at the start. And then once you're into the planning, you've got to get a list of all the tasks, estimate the cost and the time of each of those, probably only approximately, and then draw out some diagrams, a bit like this one here, but we'll come back to them, I expect.
Yep.
So draw out some diagrams, think about whether you've got enough people and what the risks are. The diagram you want to finish, by the way, you want to finish with something like this, which is a Gantt chart. I don't know if you can see that. We might come back to Gantt charts. And then that will probably take you a couple of hours just to get the Gantt chart. Then you just monitor your progress by colouring in the tasks as you go and checking that you're keeping up with your plan and monitoring the money as well as the progress. But we might come back to that as well again in a minute, I think.
Okay, so it doesn't sound as if it's something that is really necessarily needs to be really complicated. This is something that you can just do, as you say, start off. I can see in the background there your whiteboard where you've written your ideas up. Just transpose that. I mean, what sort of software could you use? Something like Excel maybe even to start off with, or should you go for a project management software? Well,
the main software that people use on big projects is Microsoft Project, but personally I wouldn't bother with that because it's expensive to buy, you have to learn it, it's very annoying to use, it argues with you. So personally I think Excel is really good because it doesn't argue. Excel does what you want. So I really like Excel, but before putting anything on Excel, I would probably just draw it out as a mind map on a whiteboard, maybe with post-it notes or maybe just with a pen. In fact, this one behind me is a real one I actually did to do with a band I'm in, and we were trying to work out, you know, do we record backing tracks or what do we have to do before we can get around to playing gigs? And we actually did, it's a bit sad, but we actually did draw that out. And it may look complicated, but actually it's really worth organising your thoughts out onto some sort of diagram before you try to put them into a computer, otherwise the computer will just become horrible.
Well, I could see there on your whiteboard, right at the top, it says "Get first gig." So let's put ourselves in the mind of our customers. Let's say that they've got a local business and they're thinking, I need to go and get some new business in. I'm going to maybe do get some leaflets ready and get those sent out. That could be a project, couldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And then suddenly you're thinking, so we need to get them printed. We need to get them designed. Well, maybe we need a photographer. We need to decide how many. We need to find out what they cost. And as soon as it starts to all multiply like that, and the thing is just to get a list of all the tasks,
yep.
And it could perhaps be, you might draw out a mind map of them all, and you decide how detailed you want to go. So on a really big project, you might just say print leaflets. But if that was the main thing you were focusing, you might break it down into all the things like the photography. So just get all the tasks written down, and then decide on the running order of the tasks, the dependencies, which is what's shown here. So this is where you actually think, well, what order do we have to do them in? And it's just a way of organising your thoughts, particularly when you're thinking, oh, I just can't face that job. I don't know where to even start. Yeah. A good way to do that is just to draw it out as a bit of a diagram.
And as you say, and once you start doing that, you'll start to see the dependencies and the order that things need to go in. For example, well, I need the photographer and the copywriter, or I need to provide all this to the printer. Oh, and then the printer's going to take 7 days to actually turn it round, or maybe he needs to give me an example copy first. So all of a sudden you think you've got maybe a month, and when you start to look at it, especially if you've got a drop dead date that you have to have something done by, this will force you, won't it, to actually start to work backwards and see where where are the key things on the project path.
Yeah, the best way to do it is just to put the time on each box. I haven't actually got the time on each of these boxes, because when we were thinking about this, we didn't really need to worry about how long it was going to take. We knew it would take ages. But if you
let's face it, rock and roll. Rock and roll. Project planning is not very rock and roll, is it? So that's probably why.
The others in the band think I'm a bit sad, but someone has to be organised. But what you would do if it was a work project is you'd probably put how many weeks. You could do it in days, but you probably put how many weeks on each of the boxes. And then when you look at the longest path, that tells you how long the whole thing's going to take. And I've actually just drawn, I don't know if you can see, but I've drawn in red on here, longest path. And if you put how many weeks or days on each of those boxes, you could then see how long it would take you to finish. And then you know that you mustn't promise a sooner date than that. And then everything else can just fit in around the longest path.
So you've talked about a term there that I think is important that people understand, which is the longest path, isn't it? Just explain a little bit about that and why that is so important.
Yeah, it's usually known as the critical path.
That's right.
And the longest path through the diagram will govern how long your project's going to take. So that is the date that you promise to people. And then when you're doing the project, you've got to watch those tasks more closely than the others, because if they take longer, then the whole thing's going to be delivered late. The other ones, which are known as floating tasks, can take longer. It doesn't really matter, so you don't have to worry so much about those. So the good news is usually you only have to focus on less than half of the tasks in your project. They're the ones on the critical path. So estimate them carefully and watch them carefully.
So for example, when I was talking just a moment ago about the printer, his lead times there would definitely fit on there, because that could hold things up. It's important to get things to him as quickly as possible.
Well, he might not be on the longest path. I mean, there might be something that takes even longer. But if he was, then you'd have to really hold him to that promise, and you'd have to watch him carefully and make sure he did. You might even want to what's known as granulate him down a bit. So if you can divide him down into, let's say, 3 parts that he's got to do, then you can say, well, how long is the first bit going to take? And then after a week, you can say, have you done that first bit yet? So, so that could be to provide the initial demo or something, the initial printing example for us to approve. Yes, because if you don't have enough granularity, then you have to just sit and wait for weeks, and you don't even know what he's doing, and you might be horribly disappointed when the end comes and you find he hasn't even started yet. Okay. So granularity is an interesting little idea, useful to know about. No, that's good. That's important. As you say, sometimes if you take your tasks, then that's a key point there. Take your tasks and try to then break them down into smaller parts where possible or where reasonable, because otherwise you could be in danger of just assuming it's only going to take that long. You can start to anticipate if you're going to have slippages within a task. Yes, particularly if one task is longer than the others, that's a sign you need to divide it. Or if it's a high-risk task, if it involves somebody else, if you suspect that person might be unreliable, for example, you'd want to granulate that task down more. If it's a long task, but you know it always takes that long, and it always does, then you don't need to worry about the detail of it so much. So it's associated with risk, really.
Okay. So we've talked about Gantt charts. You showed us an example there. How do we actually go about creating one then, and what's the purpose of it?
Yeah, I'll just hold that up. This is a Gantt chart. I did this using Excel.
Yep.
And you can see the red bit coming down in steps. That's the critical path. So all you do, you just have dates along the top. Which is very high tech, isn't it? Holding it up to the camera. But you have dates across the top, and with Excel, you just put the date and drag it across, don't you? And then the red steps coming down are the critical tasks. You just put them in. So following from the diagram you made before, you just put those in of the correct length. So you can see the first task is very short in mine, and then the third one is much longer. By the way, that yellow block down the middle is a holiday, so nothing happens during then. I'm just pretending I'm going to have a holiday. In reality, I never seem to get holidays. And then the blue ones underneath are the floating tasks. So they've got a certain amount of movement. So you just put the task in, and you just sort of put a little line to show that it's got the ability to move. So it starts after that one, and as long as it's done before that one, it doesn't really matter where exactly it is. Okay. So the floating tasks all hang off the critical tasks. And the Gantt chart is absolutely the thing that you must have. This diagram is really just a way to get your thoughts organized so that you can do the Gantt chart, because you have to know what the critical path is before you can make your Gantt chart. And then the floating tasks hang off that. Okay.
Chris, is that something that you could maybe share with us in a little PDF, just to give people an example? Do you have an example that we could maybe share?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, Tony, because, and actually I don't think you did know this, but on YouTube I've made a video of how to construct a Gantt chart. So you can see me gradually building it up using Excel. So it's a little bit nerdy, but I'm on Excel, and I'm just putting, it shows how do you colour in the boxes and how do you put in the floating task. If you just go to Gantt Excel demo or Chris Croft Gantt demo, anything like that, you'll find me on YouTube creating it, and there is a finished one just like that at the end, and you can see it all there.
Now I must also tell our audience that Chris, he's a budding rapper, and he's actually done a project management rap on YouTube, so I would encourage you to have a good look at that. Good fun.
Yes,
all good
the project management rap. If you search for that, it is the only one on YouTube. I think it's the only useful rap in the world, I'm going to say.
Excellent.
It actually is. If you can't cope with the rap, I've done a video called Project Management in Under 8 Minutes,
Excellent.
Which is me sensibly talking about it. But I think the rap actually is only 5 minutes. It does cover, strangely, everything you need to know.
Excellent, excellent. So if you like project management and rap, there you go, the perfect video for you.
Yes.
Now, Chris, just to finish off, then. Your top 3 tips when it comes to project management. What would be your top 3 tips then that you would give to our audience?
Well, I think the first tip that springs to mind is define the project really carefully at the beginning. So if you said to somebody, I'll do you a really good website, for example, it's not well enough defined. And what will happen is when you finally deliver the website, they won't be happy. It will be different to what they had in their mind, and there'll be problems. So really carefully agree with the person what you're going to deliver, how long it's going to take, and what it's going to cost. They're the big 3: quality, time, and cost. So get that absolutely nailed down at the start. I think that's probably the biggest cause of project failure. Okay. The second thing I would say is you must have a Gantt chart. You must have this, because it allows you to see the plan before you start. You can use it to justify how long something's going to take. Customers like to see a Gantt chart if you're doing a job for them. It also means that you can look vertically, and you can think, oh no, I'm doing all these tasks at the same time when I'm, that's only the week after my holiday. So you can start thinking about resources. So I think you must have a Gantt chart, and probably Excel, but it doesn't matter even if it's just done on a bit of paper. And I think the third tip, and this is the thing that most people don't know, is that in order to do a Gantt chart, you must do a network diagram first and work out which your longest path is by doing that. If you jump straight to a Gantt chart, you'll find it really difficult to draw. But if you start with the network diagram and you just put in the critical path first and then the rest hangs off it, then it's much easier to produce. So I think that would be my third tip: always have a network diagram before the Gantt chart. Probably take you 20 minutes to do this diagram using probably moving post-it notes around and joining them with arrows. 20 minutes, and then literally it'll just take 10 minutes to make it into a Gantt chart. So half an hour, the whole thing's done. Whereas if you try to go straight to a Gantt chart, it'll be horrible and you'll get it wrong.
Excellent. So
yeah,
we've got define the scope of the project.
Yep.
Have a project plan, ideally something like a Gantt chart. You could even
Yep.
do that using Excel. You don't need to get Microsoft Project or anything like that. And then thirdly, base your Gantt chart and your project plan on your network diagram.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Now, if you're interested in finding out more about Chris, he's got a free monthly email tips, which you can get at free-management-tips.co.uk. He's also got a free app called Just About To, which is available for Android and iPhone. And as we've mentioned, he's got his project management rap on YouTube, and you can also find lots more information on his website at chriscrofttraining.co.uk. I'll put those links below for you. And as always, we welcome your questions and comments. Chris and myself will be looking at those, and we'll definitely respond to them.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent.
Yeah, hope that's helped everybody out there.
Definitely. It definitely will. Very practical, useful hints about a very important area. Absolutely. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks so much then, Chris. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.